Hi everyone, this is Jess from Gumnut Station. I try to make 5 different projects for kids that they can do by themselves with a little bit of instruction, each one lasting about 30 minutes or as long as possible so that you can get some work done too. The first one I have for this week is developing a timeline. You can make the timeline about really anything you want. It could be a history book that you have. We have some of these books that I got from Costco, world history, American history, or another book about explorers, or really anything like dinosaurs, anything that has some sort of sequence in it. Or a book about the universe, you're going to find a sequence in there as well. In this piece of work, I spent some time outlining the instructions so that they have some idea of what they're going to do. For step 1, the step is to read about some of the explorers or pieces of history and pick 5 or however many you want them to write about, 5 or so that they find interesting. Step 2 would be to line them up in their chronological order. And then step 3 would be to write a couple of ideas about each part of history. So for this one, I actually chose an explorer book that we have, and it has a whole bunch of different explorers on land, over the sea, in space. And I picked out some that were interesting to me that I thought would be interesting to my daughter. And I just put them on little tags. We've included where the person explored, the location, and then something interesting about them, just one thing. So Leif Erikson sailed to Canada, and he was a Viking and lived in Greenland. And they can go down the list in the timeline and write something interesting to them. Here we have a setup for silly sentences. Silly or not silly, depending on what you write. I just took 3 bowls and I cut out discs. For each of the 3 bowls, we have a part of a story. So, setting, characters, and a problem. So in each of the discs in the setting, I wrote down just random ideas for locations of where you could have a story. Some examples were an eagle's nest, a castle, a tree house. For characters, you can have a lot of fun with this. I wrote a teacher, a people-eating plant, a dinosaur, a scared lion, a grandma, anything you want. For the problem, I included things like quicksand, or lost a toy, or spilled something. And then what you ask the child to do is pick randomly, kind of like a lucky dip, pick 1 disc out of each of the containers so that they have 1 setting, 1 character, and a problem, and they need to make a sentence out of it. Some of the ones that my daughter came up with were, a people-eating plant can't stop sneezing in a smelly bog. A dinosaur spilled something on a spooky pirate ship. Grandma can't stop bouncing in space. So it's quite fun to see what they come up with. And that should take some time. The third activity for this week was making a map. What I did to prepare for this was fairly simple, but it took a couple of minutes. So I just took an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and I divided it into 4 by 5 and I put the grids in. And then I put another piece of paper on the side. You could put it on 1 piece of paper, that's fine. And I listed different kinds of landforms. They're all ones that I know my daughter knows what they are, and so she didn't really have any questions. And all I told her was to use the legend, decide what symbol she wanted to use for each item in the legend, and then put it on a map of her own island. So first she made her island, and then the shape of the island, and then she filled it in with different landform features. And after that, she actually used the grid, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 at the top, and then A through E on the side. And she used the grid to say where each of those landforms are on her map. Something for social emotional learning this week, I thought I'd prepare some ideas for coping skills. A coping skill is a way that you handle a stress or a problem or a fear or anxiety. And what I did was divide up the paper into two, red and green, and I labeled it with good coping skills and poor coping skills. And each of these pieces of paper I created myself. You can leave a couple blank ones if your child is able to write down some ideas for coping skills themselves. But I wrote these ones, and I asked her to put them on the side if she thinks it's a good coping skill or a poor coping skill. And she went ahead and did that. And I also asked her at the beginning to put a star or a mark next to the coping skills that she likes to use herself or would like to use herself. And the final one for this week is just a fun one, coming up with different words that the child likes or with a theme that goes through the alphabet. So it could be a theme of animals, and they could write down different animals starting with A, B, C, all the way through Z, or it could be food, or whatever theme you like. They may not want a theme, and that's okay too, but if there's something of interest to them, you might want to try a theme. And then at the bottom I put to check when they're all done. All right, thanks for listening in this week. I hope it can help you get through the day, get some work done, and provide some learning to the child to supplement their school curriculum. If you think this was helpful, please feel free to subscribe and share. Have a great week.